let's try to have a working definition, one common definition of what oral language is. It's a very common word. However, siguro we have to have one common point of reference. So let's talk about what oral language is. So let's talk about what is oral language, okay? Oral language is a system through which spoken words are used to express knowledge, ideas, and feelings. So, pag sinabi nating oral language, developing oral language means actually developing the skills and knowledge that go into two big skills: listening and speaking, all of which have a strong relationship to reading comprehension and to writing. So pag sinabi pala nating oral language, it is not confined. Some would only say oral language, it involves speaking. But hand in hand with speaking, nandyan yung listening. Okay? The development of thinking and reading ability is closely linked to the development of oral language. So, looking at this, we have here, okay, according to Motes, these are the 5 components of oral language. Yesterday, Dr. Villanesa actually presented the 5 components with the addition of a 6th component, which is oral language. From this framework presented by Motes in 2010, you will notice that oral language is made up of at least 5 key components. All of these components are necessary to communicate and learn through conversation and spoken interaction. But there are important distinctions among them that have implications for literacy instruction. If you have noticed, these components were earlier presented by Dr. Villanesa as the 6 components of reading. 6th, being considered as the new, is oral language. However, a closer look will tell us that in each of the components, Motes 2010 posits that oral language is in the center of all these skills. All of these arrows, all of these skills will actually involve oral language skill development. Okay. Snow and Wise and their companions, okay, posit that oral language provides the foundation for learning to read and is related to overall reading achievement throughout the primary and secondary schooling. Okay? So, the 6th component of reading to reflect the range of research emphasizing the importance of oral language development to the reading process. This is affirmed in the research conducted by Scarborough in 2001, who said the children who have strong oral language skills often have strong reading and writing skills. In contrast, children with oral language problems are at higher risk of reading and writing difficulties. So that's why we say if a child will have difficulty in their oral language, all the other skills, especially reading and writing, will definitely be expected to be something that would be difficult for the learners. This is again, okay, emphasized by Cregan in Archer, Cregan and McGaugh, Shield in 2012, that oral language is the child's first, most important, and most frequently used structured medium of communication. It is the primary means through which each individual or child will be enabled to structure, to evaluate, to describe, and to control his experience. Okay. Proficiency in oral language provides children with a vital tool for thought. Without fluent and structured oral language, children will find it very difficult to think. So you see, this is especially true when we deal with with kindergarten children. No, before they would have to be able to read and write, they should already also have developed the confidence to use and express their thoughts, feelings in the oral language. Okay? That's why we say oral language is at the base of literacy. This is one reason why also in grades 1, okay, why is it that we start English, we don't immediately dive into teaching the students the macro skills of reading and writing in English. We start with oral language. We first develop their listening and oral skill to enable them to build confidence to and open, okay, their hearts and minds to learning the English language before we introduce reading and writing to them. Now, looking at this, okay, who needs oral language development? Is it only the kindergarten? Is it only the higher grades? Is oral language still a domain, still a skill that we develop in the secondary years, in senior high? Okay. Definitely, yes, okay. All students need oral language development. It's not just English language learners that need to practice oral language development. Today's society does not encourage oral language development. Various situations in our environment brought about by the changes in the 21st century, okay? So, tells us that there is a lot of need for our students, for the teachers to concentrate and focus on oral language development in the English and in the languages classroom. Now, these are some of the other reasons that we have, okay, why we need to concentrate on oral language development, especially in dealing with children at the kindergarten to grade 3 level. Okay. Earlier, one group showed us some of the factors affecting oral language. Children arrive in kindergarten with huge discrepancies in oral language development, and the gap between language advanced and language delayed children grows throughout the elementary school years. Not all children are fortunate to be born into homes where parents or caregivers provide rich language experiences. These disadvantaged children enter our kindergartens lacking oral language skills. Although we don't discuss discount the possibility that many of the children, especially in the urban areas, have a good exposure to language, especially in English, for us in the Mindanao area, for the Filipino language, okay, plus the mother tongue. But when you look back into the development of the specific skills of oral language, you will find out that there are a lot of children whose oral language skill is very deficient when they get into the classroom. Now, is it possible for teachers to design instructions that will close the language experience gap? With all of the trainings that we have been receiving, the ELL and DAP for the past years, we have been so much focused on the development of beginning e-reading instruction that somehow everybody and everyone will really be convinced that indeed teachers are now well equipped with the skills, the strategies, the techniques, the approaches, methodologies, everything that would help us improve the oral language of our students. We were provided with trainings with CLT, explicit teaching, and yet, yesterday, Dr. Rose pointed out what's happening with all of the reading programs. There's a lot of reading programs. Schools, each school meron pang school, meron pang district, meron pang division, meron pang national, meron pang personal, di ba, sa classroom natin. We also develop our own program, remediation program, nasa schedule, and yet we still find that there are still things that has to be done. Perhaps we might have overlooked. We are looking at it at a very big picture that somehow some minute details are escape scrutiny. are being neglected. And sometimes sabi natin, kahit nga sa 90, hindi mabubuo ang 100 pesos kung wala kang piso. Pag 99 yan, hindi pa rin 100 yan. So in this particular session, I would like, let us all try to look back at some of the salient points that somehow may also affect this. In a report of the NCCA 2012, okay, this is one of the observations that was pointed out regarding the preparedness of teachers in handling reading the oral language development of pupils. Sabi nila, there is evidence that some teachers may have struggled to implement this component because the underlying framework was unclear to them. They might know all of this. The strategies, the theories, the principles might be clear. But somehow, the interconnectedness of all this in the development of one major skill that the school targets might be lost. Di ba pag bumubuo tayo ng isang toy, I remember Bimbo, he would love to play Tamiya. Di ba pag yung Tamiya, pag binubuo mo, yung mga DIY toys, pag nawawala ang isang maliit na tornilyo, it will somehow affect the entire performance of that toy. Hindi siya tatakbo ng mabilis kasi nakulangan ng isang tornilyo or nakulangan ng isang napakaliit na part na minsan hindi mo na napapansin na kailangan pala talaga ito. Okay? So this is one thing that we would like to bring about in this particular session. Now, here, allow me to introduce to you the 5 components for effective oral language instruction. These are the components of effective oral language instruction, and each component is targeted through explicit instruction. Two major theories, two major approaches and strategies come into play when we try to look at this. Explicit instruction and the principles of CLT, communicative language teaching. All of these come into play when we consider how we bring the strategies into the classroom, and we put it together into these 5 components of effective oral language instruction. This is adapted from Eisenhardt of 1919. There are certain conditions that we need to consider when we develop oral language and using the repertoire of strategies and techniques brought to us by trainings. Okay? We go to specific details that somehow might affect the overall delivery and development of the oral language in the classroom. We start with the first one, okay, the yellow one. Component number 1 talks about the development of listening and speaking skills. Okay? How well children develop conversational skill can influence how well they interact with others. So number 1 would be, how do we teach listening and speaking skills using the strategies that we have learned? According to Carey, 1982, the vast majority, approximately 80% of teacher talk in classroom is focused on tasks. Okay? Giving instruction, providing information, correcting behavior, or giving out information, teaching the concepts to students. Of this, 80% of it consists of low-level questions that ask children to recall information rather than open-ended questions, requiring children to think at higher levels. What is happening here? One of the misconceptions that this finding also informed us that there's a misconception about what teachers believe to be teaching. Diba? Pagsasabihin, you have to teach. So what does teaching involve? Many teachers would equate it to discussing telling and informing the children how to do it. So what happens? That the classroom is dominated by teacher talk. So yung mga bata would only respond based on the questions that are given out to students. So yes, no, or repeat after me. That's the common. That's why, sabi nga kahapon ni Ma'am Rose, what happens is that it is the oral language of the teacher who is being refined, polished, strengthened during classroom instruction, which should be dapat the other way around. Many of our teachers, because research would tell us, majority of the teachers would teach the way they have learned. Many of us were born of the previous kind of traditional approach wherein we listen to the teacher. We follow after the teacher. That's why we need to at least exert more effort to teach the teachers to what? Allow and provide the children to talk, asking them questions rather than higher order and open-ended questions that would require children to think at higher levels. So let's see, what are these things that has to be taught? Alam natin ang strategies. Yes, alam natin paano gagawin. So therefore, with this, hand in hand, what else do we have to teach when we try to develop oral language? Elements that need to be explicitly taught before embarking on formal instruction of oral language is number 1, awareness of broad rules that govern social interaction. Create awareness of the way conversation works by considering the rules to be observed by good speakers and good listeners. What does this mean? Number 1, do we teach turn-taking? Okay. Isa yan. Do we, although children would have to listen to us, but do we explicitly teach them how it works? When do you stop? When do you pause? When are you supposed to interrupt? This might not really come in the handbook about what you should be doing when you are using the strategies and activities that you present. But somehow, this is something that you should always see to it that children are exposed to. Turn-taking. Repair of their speech. If they talk and they commit mistakes, how do you repair? Sabi kanina may bullying because sometimes the culture would tell us to laugh at the mistakes. But teachers should see to it that even before you start introducing this, these are things that we have to teach. Politeness, rules for listening, nonverbal behaviors. Remember, it's not only speech. It's not only the words that come out from our mouth. The facial expression is also a way of communication. The body language is also part of this. Rules for listening. What do you do? How do you show that you are listening? Okay. When you talk, what are the things that you have to remember? These are some things that has also to be explicitly taught as you provide your students with activities that would help them communicate their thoughts and ideas. Okay. Number 1 would be, how do you go about teaching this? Especially in the lower grades, teachers should always bear in mind there is a need for you to talk with your children. Not only during lessons, not only during classes, but the classroom itself should be an environment that would welcome talk, and talk. Gone are the days na negative masyado yung talkative. Diba sabi nga, palagi na lang, ayaw natin ng children. Pag sinabing that this child is very talkative, anong dating? Negative. But, somehow, this is the most important thing that that the school should actually be developing. That talkative, being talkative is not a negative thing, but a positive thing, because this will showcase, this demonstrates that the child is actually learning the language that you are targeting. Teachers should talk or converse with their children whenever possible. Children often love to talk about their friends, families, or favorite activities. Try to develop talking points. Talking points are conversation starters that you can use with your children. Okay? So, for example, in activities, in our CLT activities, one of the best things that would somehow be very productive would be to have talking points for children. Okay? Like, if you are going to, let's say, if you're going to field trip, if you're going to the canteen, okay, those are talking points that would somehow help the children come up with be able to collect their thoughts and ideas and talk about this freely. Okay. What, for example, if you win a trip for two to Disneyland, o nanalo ka ng isa ng sa amin kasi sa KCC every month, there are times you win 500 pesos for a ticket. Oh, if you win a ticket worth 500 pesos shopping ticket, what will you do with that? So these are some of general talking points that you can have children, okay, start talking to you. And one of the rule is that we welcome mistakes. Sinasabi nga natin sa CLT, errors are welcomed. You don't correct errors, especially if children are expressing their thoughts and ideas, because somehow it will cut and stop them from sharing, stop them from talking. Okay, another way that we develop listening and speaking skills is that, especially in the early grades, teachers should get close and listen to students. When speaking with children, it is important to get close. The child should be able to see your lips and facial expression, hear your voice clearly, and make eye contact with you. Making sure that you get close helps ensure that the children keeps an interest in what you are saying. So that means to say, this is one way that we remember in explicit teaching. Whenever we provide students the opportunities, the avenues, our activities will require students to talk, see to it that you are modeling the very skill that you are seeking to develop in your students. So one of that is getting close and listen. Sometimes teachers would commit na blunder na habang nagre-recite, nakatingin dun sa nakatingin. Sige, you recite. Now that is one way that children remember how you respond and how you react to the speaking and listening activities that you provide with your children will definitely have an impact on the future participation of the students in similar activities. The attentive body language, expanding children's responses, asking clarifying questions, and using reflective listening techniques are ways to support children's continued participation in current and future dialogues. Help children listen to one another, because when adults listen, children will notice and they soon too will follow. Okay? Responding and expanding is one way wherein we develop oral language. So we see teachers are the very influential factor in the development of oral language of the students. And this is evident in what these slides tell us. When a children says something to you, respond whenever possible. After you respond, try to expand the conversation. Add more context to the language even when a child's response is a simple one. For example, if the child says, I like apples, you might say, I like apples too. What kind of apples do you like? So sometimes we base it from what the responses of children is to our question. Okay. The component 2. Okay. So after speaking and listening, so we know that together, we develop these skills using a variety of strategies. All of the strategies that somehow we are using in CLT, in ELLN, okay, are things that would help us develop oral language. Now, in component 2, for an effective classroom instruction, we say here that we should teach a variety of spoken text. The primary purpose of language is to communicate needs, wants, ideas, information, and feelings. Many theories claim that the different purposes for which we use language fall under various categories. So, what are the need? What is it that we need to teach explicitly to our learners? Okay, it is important when addressing the different types of language to give consideration to one, the range of different social contexts of language. So, what are some of the activities that you can have? These are some of the activities. We have conversation stations in the classroom. Component number 3 talks about creating a language learning environment. Okay. Not only are the activities should be well crafted to be able to develop the oral language of the students, but the environment in itself, the classroom environment. It is important that the classroom environment is supportive and nurturing, where a variety of communication styles are valued, accepted, and accommodated. Teachers can design differentiated teaching and learning activities that draw on pupils' interest, knowledge, and skills. So how do we do this? We have three things consider in creating this. Number 1 would be the physical environment. Remember, in ELLN, there's much weight that we give in the development of a classroom culture, a classroom environment, okay, that is supportive of the language learning. By enriching the physical environment of the classroom, multiple opportunities for engaging oral interaction and development will exist. So, the displays that you put in the classrooms, the posters and the pictures, the toys, things, anything that you put in the classroom, creative areas, library, okay, for children's books. We can also have listening corners and conversation stations. Now, defining how a room will be structured, okay, such as sa kindergarten meron tayo, okay? But for higher grades like grades 1 and grades 2, teachers can actually come up with areas and stations wherein children will be very conscious about what is it they do in that particular area. Defining these areas and using them as how they are supposed to be used would be would make a difference in the behavior and response of the children towards the use of this. The development of oral language skill is not limited to the formal instruction, but actually it goes even outside the formal instruction. That's why sabi natin earlier, teachers should talk, and talk. You talk with, not talk to the children. That's why you only throw bits and pieces of questions and let them do the talking. That's something that we try to at least consider when developing oral language of our students. Provide prompts that promote oral language. Involve pupils in developing classroom displays that showcase their case. Illustrate new concept or support their learning of new skill. Encourage pupils to explain or describe deep displays to visitors. A language learning environment, all of the things that is inside the classroom should somehow be something that the children would be able to talk about. Okay? Classroom culture is another aspect that we have to consider. By enriching the physical environment of the classroom, we create multiple opportunities for engaging oral interaction and development. Okay? Create a classroom culture of have a go, be sensitive to cultural differences, emphasize enjoyment for all. Encourage all attempts by the children at both speaking and listening. Show and ask is one example wherein speaking and listening skills are being developed in the students. Okay. Teach pupils to share classroom responsibilities, maintain an emphasis on enjoyment, provide opportunities for the children to reflect and review their speaking and or listening, and explicitly teach students to take turns in groups. Communicate high expectations and motivate pupils to speak with all members of the class. Again, we would like to emphasize that these things, okay, you cannot develop oral language just by simply instructing, okay? Just by simply telling the children what to do. You have to, number one, model it, practice it with the students, and then observing them do it. That is what we are trying to have here, okay? And the last one for this language learning environment is providing opportunities for communication. Communication happens all the time in the classroom. By taking advantage of certain communication opportunities, students can be exposed to multiple oral language contexts and uses. So the component number 4 is teach and extend vocabulary and conceptual knowledge. Vocabulary is the term used to describe the collection of words in a given language used and understood in speaking, listening, reading, and writing. As children develop, they need to be able to draw on different sets of vocabulary, and as such, teachers need to be mindful of these different sets when selecting words for instruction. Okay? So, how do we teach this? How do we do this in the classroom? Okay. First, we teach individual words. Direct word meaning teaching is an effective way to facilitate children's vocabulary development. And the last one is promoting auditory memory. Auditory memory involves the ability to assimilate information presented orally, to process that information, store it, and recall what has been heard. Essentially, it involves the task of attending, listening, processing, storing, and recalling. Hindi pala, kailangan pala natin ng auditory. How do we teach auditory memory skills? In developing oral language of our student, this is one of the factors that we have to consider. Okay? That's why we develop, how to develop auditory memory skills. We start with repeat and use information. Reciting poems, songs, tales, and rhymes. Okay? Memorize and sequence songs. Retelling stories and fairy tales and myths. Retell stories using puppets or by illustrating a map. Okay? These are some of the activities that we can have. What are we trying to do here? To try to see to it that the listening skills of our students are being developed as well as their auditory memory skills. Sometimes children just sit down and look at us as if they are listening. But somehow, pag tanungin mo, sasabihin sa'yo, ano nga yun, ma'am? Yun pala, nasa cloud 9 na, lumilipad ang isip. So, by practicing these things, okay, by practicing all of these things, this would somehow help the children improve their memory. That's why they would have to focus carefully on what is it that they are listening to. All of the activities should be purposive and relevant to the skills that we are trying to develop. Okay. In order for the children to improve oral language development, what are we saying here? 3 things that they should remember to do. Number 1 is? Number 2? Number 3? Okay. Nothing happens by chance. If we want something to happen, then there should be something that has to be done. If we want to develop the oral learning skills of our students, we have to provide the avenue and the opportunities. Children, especially in English, the opportunities and the avenues will only be available in the classroom with the teacher. Knowing all of these strategies, knowing all of the memorizing and mastering the strategies that ELLN, we have now the e-digital of the version of the ELLN, which gives us very, very explicit ways on how to go about, okay, developing the reading skills of our students. If we don't use them properly, we don't do something about practicing it with the children, then definitely we will still always be back to square one. As the Chinese proverb often says, di ba? Ito palagi nating binabalik-balik. I hear and I forget. I listen and I remember. I do and I understand. Tell me and I'll forget. Show me and I may not remember. Involve me and I'll understand.